Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the first ever live virtual public art tour of Lake Ann Village Center. I'm Abby Felding. I'm the program coordinator for Public Art Reston, and I'm going to be your online administrator for this afternoon's tour. We're excited to bring you this program in partnership with the Reston Historic Trust Museum. Usually we'd be doing this tour on the ground and in person, but with the pandemic going on, we really want to try to take this tour virtual. So we're going to be walking you through some of the public artworks at Lake Ann today, sharing some stories and answering your questions. The tour should last about an hour, including time to take questions. Today I'm joined by Ann Delaney, Executive Director at Public Art Reston, Alexandra Campbell, Executive Director of the Reston Historic Trust Museum, and Phoebe Avery, who is a Program Coordinator for Public Art Reston, like myself. They are going to be on the ground and at different artworks at Lake Ann, and of course they're going to be wearing masks and practicing safe social distancing. They may take them off at some point if no one's nearby and to improve audio, but if someone's going to get close, they'll put them back on. A little housekeeping before we jump in. During the tour today, you'll notice that neither your video nor your mic is on. We're going to keep those off to preserve bandwidth, but please feel free to ask questions in the Zoom chat window, and we'll try to get to as many of those as possible in the event. Today, 3 attendees are going to win a door prize. We're going to select the winners from a pool of participants that joined us today, and we're going to contact them by email once they're selected. We're going to announce the winners on social media too, and you guys can pick up your prizes at the Reston Museum. So let's start with a poll. Okay, so that should be popping up on your screen right now. How many of you have ever been to Lake Ann Village Center before? I'll give you guys a second to go ahead and answer those. Wow, okay, so that's so great. So it looks like most of you have been, which is great. So you'll have some background coming in, and then a few of you also know a bit about the sculptures already, and a few of you haven't been, so welcome. Hope you enjoyed the tour. I'm going to kick off the tour by having Alexandra Campbell and Ann Delaney say a few words. So here is Alexandra Campbell from the Reston Museum.
Okay, so hi, my name is Alexandra Campbell. I'm the Executive Director of the Reston Historic Trust Museum, and we're starting the tour today inside the museum. The museum just reopened last week. We're free to visit, so I hope you all can stop by. We preserve and celebrate Reston's unique history as a planned community founded by Robert E. Simon Jr. And one of the founding principles of Reston was that Reston would be beautiful. And one way they did this was through public art. And Lake Ann was Reston's first village center and has an abundance of public art. And we're going to look at some of the sculptures today. So let's get started.
Hello, my name is Ann Delaney. I am the Executive Director of Public Art Reston. The organization was founded in 2007, and our mission is to inspire an ongoing commitment to public art and create a new generation of artworks. I would like to, of course, welcome you to this tour, and I would like also to acknowledge both 2 colleagues from the Association for Public Art in Philadelphia, Caitlin Martin and as well as Ashley Lipolis, who really inspired us to present this tour today. So I will now, of course, take a few more minutes, but say how delighted we are to partner with the Reston Historic Trust and Museum to present this tour, and I will see you back shortly. It's now back to Alexandra.
Okay, hi everyone. I am standing in front of Untold Stories by Zachary Oxman. This sculpture is also known as Bronze Bob, and it's a sculpture of Reston's founder, Robert E. Simon Jr. And so he's sitting here greeting everybody who comes to Lake Ann Plaza with a smiling face. And this sculpture was installed in 2004 for our first Founders Day celebration, which celebrated not only Robert Simon's 90th birthday, but also Reston's 40th anniversary. And it's a wonderful place to get a selfie with. Let's see if I can do this. Are there any questions about Bronze Bob?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Did Bob Simon know about the sculpture before it was unveiled?
No, actually, this was a surprise for Simon's birthday. So it was unveiled, and we have some wonderful photographs in the collection of the Reston Historic Trust Museum of Simon being surprised with the unveiling of the sculpture.
Oh, that's really fun. Okay, that's great. Okay, then let's go ahead and go over to Phoebe.
It is lovely to be here with everyone today. Behind me is the sculpture by James Rosant, who was the architect, one of the architects of Lake Anne Village Center, along with his colleague, Bill Conklin. And I'm going to try to turn my camera around here. I'll just show you. So this is a sculpture that was made in cast concrete. And the architects and planners of Lake Anne Village Center, along with Reston's founder, Robert Simon, were so inspired by the plazas and open spaces that they had seen in Europe, and they wanted to bring that feeling here to Lake Anne Village Center in this new town of Reston. And a central part of such works in, in the European village squares are their fountains, their gathering places, their places for community. And for Robert Simon in particular, that idea of community was so important, that you bring people together. So how can you do that? You can create a fountain, a lively work of art that also incorporates the movement of the water. And I'm just walking around. I want to invite everyone, if you would like, to not only ask questions, to make observations and comments as we look at these sculptures today, because we would love to know what you think, if you've been here before or if you're new to the site. So this fountain, as you can see, may not remind you of, if you're familiar with some examples of like the Trevi Fountain in Rome, or in Piazza Navona, or in Paris, or other major European cities or towns like Portofino, which was a big inspiration for Simon and his planners. That James Rosant, he was not only an architect, and here I'm showing you a bit of the plaza, he was also an artist who, during his lifetime, did many paintings, and these sculptures that he did for Lake Anne are some of the few examples of sculpture that he did during his career. But this one was inspired by the language of modernism. So these are abstract forms that leave us, the viewer, to fill in a way what we think, to bring our own ideas to them. They were inspired in part by sandcastles and casting concrete in place. So these were poured in place. It's kind of a similar process. Rosant and his friend, the sculptor Gonzalo Fonseca, who had also been trained as an architect, all of these people were so like-minded in a way. They were part of this artistic community who really had similar ideas about what art could be and how to use public art in a very new and innovative way in this new town to give primacy to art in daily life. So as I said, Rosant and his friend, and I'm just showing you some parts, these sort of tube-like parts here, were inspired by sandcastles that the two friends made on vacations in Italy and on Long Island. And so they would, Rosant and Fonseca would compete to make these sandcastles, and their children would be there as well. And each of them had 4 children. So the children talk about the experience of these incredible structures that they created, not sandcastles we might be used to, but pyramids and curving staircases. And so Rosant was thinking about that, these kinds of natural organic forms. What might these 3 vertical structures remind you of? To me, I've always thought about it perhaps as towers, or maybe a group of a family grouping of 2 adults and a child. But this fountain invites people to step on in. There are stepping stones in here. So even everything is so well considered. Even the pavements here swells up and then dips downward to invite you in. And so normally we would have water gushing out of here, but it's really a fun opportunity also right now on this gorgeous day to look at some of the details here, the kinds of whimsical sort of planetary forms or niches that were not only typical of Rosant in his paintings. He did fantastical cityscapes and such, but also Fonseca. So these works are almost like a conversation that the two artists are having. And all of these artists were also interested in archaeology and ideas from the past and forms from the past, but kind of translating them into a new modern syntax. So I'm going to move over to another element designed by Rosant a little bit earlier. And if I didn't mention the date, I will mention now that if I didn't mention the pulpit, and this was an unplanned element. So Bob Simon really gave his designers and his team was a lot of freedom to explore the site. And this pulpit, as we call it, is a raised platform. And I am not going to try to get into this pulpit today, just because, as you can see, and it's so geometric, these steps are really sized for small feet, but it is a way for this element that Rosant designed was in 1963. So a couple of years earlier when they were building the site, again, a cast concrete form, but a way to kind of view the plaza in a different way. There's real theatricality to this site. And Rosant said, you know, they thought of it as a place to see and be seen. So that element of community, of different vantage points at the site, the visual delight that they wanted to create. So hopefully you all can see across the way at the Washington Plaza Baptist Church, there is another, what we call a crow's nest or platform raised on a cylindrical column. And I will show you the other side of this pulpit, but again, an element that is speaking to this form so that we have these repetitions. Across the way from the pulpit is their tower, the Heron House. And if you can see above, hopefully my camera is showing you that, above there are these projections on this very modernist apartment building that serve absolutely no practical function. But again, that idea of a sculptural element at the top of the building, it's like these artists and architects are just exploring the possibilities of the visual language here. And then those forms are repeated in other elements throughout the plaza. Everything speaks to each other, the architecture, the public art. And this public art was thought of as play sculpture as well, to invite that element of engagement and play. So I'm going to pass along before we go over to Anne across the water. I'm going to ask Abby, do you have any questions or observations, comments before we move on?
I do have a question. Someone was asking, do we have any idea why the fountain is off today?
I believe, and maybe Alex can speak to this more as well, I think they're taking opportunity to do some work on it.
Okay, so they're gonna be doing some work on it. That's great to know. Great to know. Alex just said that in the chat that the fountain is going under repairs right now, so good to know. Okay. And then for the pulpit, did Reston always leave like imprints from the molding on his sculpture?
Oh, that is an excellent question. Yes, and that is something that the architects and designers here, you know, it's part of a truce almost to materials. The idea that you, if you're using concrete, you leave the mold, the evidence of the form, the wooden mold. And when we're at the end of the tour, I will try to show you, or you might have noticed our participants today, that there was a photograph of the actual installation of the fountain where you're seeing the wooden mold. And so that form is left here. And it's wonderful because it also is like an abstract painting in a way. And so it adds to the textural quality. And so it was very intentional to leave that. But that's a wonderful question. And thank you for noticing that.
Okay. Great. I think that's all of our questions. Thank you so much, Phoebe.
Great. So I'm going to pass the tour along now to Anne Delaney, who's on the other side of the plaza, who will talk about Rosant and Gonzalo Fonseca.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, and can you see my camera?
Yes, we can.
Very good. So, hello, I am here now, and I will continue with James Rosant and show you the lookout tower that was built in 1964. And can you see it now?
Yes, looks great.
Okay, very good. So the lookout tower actually was built as to test the concrete of the Heron House that Phoebe mentioned earlier on, that you can see hopefully from a distance, but it's just next to the lookout tower. And as you can see, the structure includes chimney-like elements where you see perhaps the 1964, but also those tests for the planters that is one at the top, you know, of the staircase, but also another one that is at the bottom of the staircase. And these are planters that are also and beautifully aligned on each balcony of the Heron House. And hopefully you can see some of the plants along the edges of the balconies. And what is interesting, again, an element, and we just missed, there was a father with his child climbing up those very steep steps that also seem to be an element that the Rosant took from the pulpit. And this structure is also called, I think it's Conklin who referred to it also as the Moonlight Viewing, which is perfect if you stand upstairs, and I will not attempt to do so today. And you can have a view over the lake, but also over the plaza, which now takes us to one of my favorite works called Sunboat. And it's quiet today, though it wasn't over the weekend. Usually it's occupied by kids who come and venture into this sunboat that you hopefully can see here. And this sculpture, this whole concrete pad actually is a play area that was realized by Gonzalo Fonseca, who is an artist who was born and raised in Uruguay. And then he studied architecture for 3 years. Then when he met the artist Torres Garcia, was interested into painting, and then moved on to sculptures. And the sculptures at Lake Anne were built in 1965 when Bob Simon hired Gonzalo Fonseca as an artist in residence. So I guess we can conclude that Gonzalo Fonseca was the first Reston artist in residence who was hired along, of course, Conklin with Whittlesey and Rosant. And he built this structure inspired really by his, his training as an architect and as a painter, but also through his travels to the Mediterranean and also to South America. And he visited archaeological sites as well. And as you can see, you know, there are very abstract forms, shapes that reoccur in the work of Gonzalo Fonseca, such as the cube, or here, this concrete platform has this shape that is really reoccurring in many of his artworks, but also this cylinder and pyramid and other objects that you have over here on this other concrete platform. But he also created these lintels and steps. But what is also very fun is that he creates also these steps that are almost impossible to climb, maybe except for children. And of course, you know, one story that Bob Simon recalled is that when he gave the tours of Lake Anne when it was first built, there were kids playing in the boat and pointing to the lake. And Bob Simon asked, "What is happening?" And the kids screamed, "Sharks, sharks," because, you know, and for Bob Simon, I think it was really gave him great joy because he wanted his the sculptures here at Lake Anne to be playful. And it was also really an interest of Gonzalo Fonseca in terms of the type of work that he created. And I must say that the work that Gonzalo Fonseca created in 1965 is among a small group of public art works that he realized between 65 and 70, including works for in the Bronx and also for the 1968 Mexico Olympics. And he also represented Uruguay for the very world-renowned Venice Biennial. So I will now pass it back. Oh, unless there are questions, Abby.
Yes, there is a question here. Let's see. Was public art a large part of Gonzalo Fonseca's art practice, or are the artworks in Reston the only public artworks he did?
As I mentioned, were a few, but there aren't that many public artworks that we are aware of, except, you know, a few in the United States and in Mexico. But his art itself is really, you know, one thing I forgot to mention is that the works here are in concrete, and also when he was here, he built 2 sculptures in weathered wood. One was called the building, and the other one was called the wooden horse. But he also has created amazing sculptures in marble, travertine, and also in bronze. And some are really large scale. So if they haven't been shown, you know, in public spaces, they have definitely been shown in museums.
Okay, that's very cool. Thank you so much. So I guess we should move along then to Phoebe.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, can you all hear me again? I just want to double check.
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so before we go over to the last work that we're going to talk about by Rosant, I did want to show you from the opposite side of the water, the pulpit, which maybe you can see across the way here. It says Lake Anne, 1963. And as I said, this was an unplanned element. So it was a way to visually account for a slight incline along the seawall here. And you can see that the columns continue, the columns that support the terraces on the townhouses here along the inlet that then lead out to the lake. So I'm going to walk us over to what is called Pyramid. This work by Rosant was also created in cast concrete. And I also want to show you how thoughtful the design of this site was, using concrete slabs here to create a kind of sight line that leads us along the plaza. So I will say that these architects, Rosant and Conklin, studied with a man named Walter Gropius. This year is the 100th anniversary of the seminal design school, architecture school known as the Bauhaus. And we are fortunate that Gropius ended up at the Harvard School of Design, and both Conklin and Rosant were trained by Gropius. So this Bauhaus thinking was very much a part of the history of Lake Anne Village Center and these early designers and architects for Reston. And as Anne Delaney mentioned, we should say initially the architectural firm was Whittlesey and Conklin, and then later became Conklin and Rosant. And Conklin and Rosant designed the Navy Memorial in downtown Washington in 1987, and other seminal buildings in New York, Butterfield House, if you know that. Rosant would go on to design structures in Tanzania and around the world. But we are lucky to have some of his, as I said, few sculptural works. And so here is a structure called the Pyramid or Pyramid. And as you can see, it is not your average pyramid. Of course, almost every culture has some pyramidal form. So as we mentioned, you know, these were artists and architects who were steeped in history and interested in the past, but also how do we create a visual dialogue with the past that is also modern and universal. They wanted universal forms that spoke to everyone. And in a very Bauhaus way, they integrated these sculptures by using the concrete that was also used in the buildings, in the townhouses. So there's that visual dialogue, that all of it is a piece. In German, we might refer to it as a Gesamtkunstwerk, or total work of art that was part of that Bauhaus thinking. So this pyramid, I'm walking around, of course, whenever you look at sculpture, because it is three-dimensional, you want to get all the way around it. And Rosant is really having fun playing with the shifting forms, the verticals and the horizontals, and these various elements. So the work looks different from every side. Conklin, and there's a wonderful film made many years ago about the public art in Reston, where he was interviewed and said that their intent at Lake Anne was to create works that were sophisticated enough for adults to enjoy and engaging enough for children to play on. So normally there would be kids, and my own have done so, sitting on this work, enjoying it, as well as the sunboat. They wanted these works to be engaged with. So many sculpture parks across the country are reopening, and places like Storm King Art Center in New York State have said, you know, we can't have people climbing, but these are still open for people to climb on safely, we hope. So I mentioned how Rosant did these contests, these sand sculpture contests with his friend, and now you've seen an example of the work of Gonzalo Fonseca. So when Rosant's daughter and the kids of Fonseca as well came to this site in the early 60s after their fathers had created these works, Juliette Rosant said it was like walking into a full-size example of their sand sculptures, and that was quite amazing to her. This sculpture was also affectionately called the Cave, and as you can see, it's very much sized for a smaller person, and originally there was a water fountain inside, so kids could clandestinely get away from their minders for a moment to get a refreshing drink. So there's just a wonderful feeling about these works in the sense that they've been part of Reston's history and the life of this community for over 50 years now. So Abby, did we get any questions while I was talking?
Yes, we did. Was the pyramid cast in a single piece?
I have never seen the mold of the pyramid, so I'm not sure. That is an excellent question, and I'll do a little more research, and maybe we can include that on our website, or if someone wanted to email us afterward, I don't want to say for sure. Each part of the fountain was individually cast, and you'll see here also that you don't see the lines so much. You see now the rough concrete more, so maybe the original lines, but I don't know. But I will say about concrete, that concrete is interesting in that it's always local to the place. So it connects it to its site because you have to use local stones and materials. So, you know, the Romans had their specialized tufa, their volcanic rock that they used when they originally developed concrete casting like this. And we're, you know, using a similar technique today. So that is what makes this very much a Reston work in that sense. So all these little stones you see would have been locally gathered and such. Do we have any other questions or comments?
Yes. Was it originally outfitted with a water fountain, and how did that work?
The water fountain was inside, and I'll try to take my camera in here. If you can, Abby, can you see that hole there where it was?
Yes.
Okay. So it would have, like a fountain, the water was piped in from below the plaza. And at some point, I'm not sure why, they decided to remove it.
Okay, that's very neat though that worked down there. So thank you so much. I guess we'll then be moving on to Anne at the North Shore Drive Underpass.
Okay, well, this is the end of me on the tour, and I just want to thank everybody again for joining us today. It's such a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, Phoebe.
Thank you.
Can you see me, Abby?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
All right, very good. So I'll turn my camera. I'm sitting on a bench by the North Shore Drive underpass, and actually a family just arrived, and it is sitting on the swing, which is the first work I was going to talk about. The swing was built by, conceived by Roll, one of the partners with Whittlesley and Conklin. And it was originally, and I'll move, but it was originally, rather than have this swing in wood, it was a cane wicker, which had an ovoid shape. And when it was built, of course, the whole area did not have, the landscaping that it has nowadays. So you could see the Vengle Bridge, and I walked over the Vengle Bridge when I walked from the Sunboat area to the North Shore Drive underpass. So that is now, I think, a well-enjoyed element here by the North Shore Drive underpass. And now I will move on to the first underpass of Reston that includes where public art was incorporated by Gonzalo Fonseca. And it starts with, again, a typical element of Gonzalo Fonseca's artwork, which is this totem-like shape with, again, peepholes. And I realized that I missed one pylon by the Sunboat, but I hope you will all come back or may be familiar with it. But you can see the peepholes here. And I was told, as you can see, the area now has, many trees and plants, but initially this was a flatter area and people could see through these peepholes, again, the Vengle Bridge. But now I just imagine that from the other side, you can see the wall of the North Shore Drive underpass. And so I will start in this area where, again, Gonzalo Fonseca really incorporated into the structure of the underpass, the walls, but also he built seating and used, again, these, though I suspect that this wood has been replaced since the sculpture was built in the 60s. But, this is a seating area with a table. But we see one element that is very characteristic of Gonzalo Fonseca's work, which is a niche in the wall of the concrete here, the concrete that frames the seating area. And this underpass, Bob Simon told me it was the widest one in Reston, which really is unique because of the slanted, surfaces, but then the wall that welcomes, again, this is I guess my second favorite piece of Gonzalo Fonseca, is this little building protruding from the wall. And it includes these details of the ladder with, openings and what I imagine are figures. And I can just imagine a Romeo and Juliet story, but it's also very much reminiscent of I feel archaeological sites, and to continue, with the other shapes that Gonzalo Fonseca creates and that we see in all his work, a cylinder or half a sphere, and on the wall over here you can see the moon and the sun, perhaps, and you see at the very far here there's a hole, but again protruding architectural elements that you have on the end wall over there, but also on the other side of the underpass. Again, with a sphere carved into the concrete, which is actually a mold, of course, not carved, and again, a lintel. But what is really fun is a different version of the Sunboat that you can see also includes one of the elements of the fountain that Trevi showed you on the plaza. And now returning on this side, and I will walk through this pylon that has this amazing ovoid shape, and kids love to climb and sit in that shape. And what you see also is what also Phoebe talked about, is the structure, the texture of the concrete, where you see really the lines or the imprint of the wood that was used as a cast for this sculpture. And as you can see, so this underpass is anchored at both ends by these pylons or totem-like shape, and that you can always see through. Gonzalo Fonseca gives you opportunities to look through different openings, whether they're square, oval, or round. And here again, you can see that he incorporated these steps, but also added these metal elements in sphere. And if you go and look, visit, I really encourage you to visit Gonzalo Fonseca's website, which is Gonzalo Fonseca, and you will see his sculptures, other examples of his sculptures in stone, and you will recognize these elements that are really part of his artistic expression. And across here, you see again this totem. And in fact, I referred earlier on to the sculpture, the two sculptures in wood that he did, and one of them was the building. And the building included in wood a similar structure as the one that you see here, with step-like shapes. And the top to me is also like a figure with a head. So that is really unique also on this side of the North Drive underpass. So that concludes it for me, Abby. Are there any questions?
Yes. Did Fonseca ever write about this artwork, or any of the kind of really fantastic and curious shapes and kind of stories he was telling with it?
Well, I forgot, I should mention that Gonzalo Fonseca was friends with the sculptor Isamu Noguchi. And in 2017 and 2018, the Noguchi Museum hosted this amazing exhibition of the work of Gonzalo Fonseca. I don't know, I'm not aware of writings, but the reason I mentioned the exhibit is that I saw notebooks that included actually designs for the underpass as well as for the sunboat. So there are definitely sketchbooks that exist and that are probably in the Fonseca's estate, but I have not seen writings by Gonzalo Fonseca about his work here in Reston.
Okay. It's very, very lovely and very imaginative.
Mm-hmm, it is.
Okay. Well, that's great. Is there anything you'd like to say before I pass it back to Alex?
Well, yes, I would like to say, you know, that the vision of Bob Simon and of the architects he hired to build Lake Ann Village Center is really an amazing model for public art Reston in terms of successfully integrating public art into a new site and looking, you know, at the use of material by the artists and also of the scale of the artworks that are really fitting for the plaza or for the underpass. And that is really, you know, after close to, I guess, if I count correctly, 50 years, it's really, again, a very good example of what, you know, public art, playful public art, you know, is integrated into a site. So I will end it here and thank you all for joining our first live virtual tour. And I hope, you know, you will be able to continue to, or at least discover if you haven't come and have a closer look at the artworks, and also to see many other artworks that we have not covered today. So thank you all, and thank you, Abby.
All right, thank you. I'm going to pass it back to Alex now.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're back inside the museum and we're looking at our gift shop. We have Reston books and apparel and gifts. And what I'm specifically going to focus on right now is the books that we have by Public Art Reston that we sell here in the gift shop, but also online on our website. And this is a wonderful way for you to continue exploring public art around Reston. And I'll just open this up so you can get a little taste of it. So it gives a lot of detail of all the public art here at Lake Ann, some that we touched on today and the others that we didn't. So hope you take advantage of the publications that we're selling here. And thank you all for joining us today. Really appreciate everybody coming on the tour.
Great, thank you so much. I am going to show you, I'm going to share my screen with you really quickly and talk about a couple things before we say goodbye. As Phoebe mentioned earlier, here's that image that she was talking about from the building of the fountain and kind of the beautiful wood molds they made to make that happen. So I think we can kind of assume they used similar methods to make the other concrete sculptures, which I think is kind of an interesting thing to note. So I'm going to show you the door prizes that I mentioned earlier that people win if they get drawn in our raffle today. And so we have those public art tour books, we have a mug, and then we have a great t-shirt. I'm gonna have us do a poll really quick. That should be popping up for you guys now. Now that you've seen the public artworks at Lakeland Village Center, do you have a favorite? I'll give you guys a minute to answer those. Oh, that's really great. Okay, so it looks like we got a lot of fans of the fountain here. That's one of my favorites too. It's really great. That's very cool. It looks like there's popularity among all the sculptures. They're very cool. Okay, thank you guys so much for answering that. Okay, so we really hope that you all enjoyed the tour today. If you did, please consider supporting Public Art Reston and the Reston Historic Trust Museum so we can keep making programs and projects like this here in Reston. Information on how to support our organizations can be found on our websites. Please follow both of our organizations on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. It's at Public Art Reston and at Reston Museum. And you can also sign up for newsletters on our respective websites to find out more about future events and learn more about what we do. Today's tour was recorded. Sorry, let me move on to the next slide. Those are our websites again if you need them. Today's tour was recorded, and so we're going to be posting that tour online. So please keep an eye out for that and share it. We're going to also reach out in the next 24 hours or so with a brief survey and to ask what you thought about this event. It's our first time doing it, so we'd love to get your feedback and find out about whether or not you'd be interested in attending another similar event in the future. We're also going to be reaching in the next 24 hours or so to our door prize winners. You're going to be able to pick up those prizes at the Reston Museum. We're also going to post those winners on social media, so keep an eye out. Thank you so much again for joining us today. We hope you had as much fun as we did, and thank you so much. We hope you have a great day, and we hope to see you again at a future event. Thank you.